Okay, all the fun times are over now.
Yeah, watch what you say, Troy.
Let me just fix my shirt. Is that too much? I don't know.
Looks rosy to me.
And so Shane, you're going to be driving the slideshow the whole way. So when we want slides
And then-
advanced.
Correct.
Perfect. Thanks.
Just for folks who may have signed in already, we're just giving it a couple minutes for some more to sign in, and we'll get started here shortly. And good morning. Good rainy morning. Ottawa is getting, it's raining there right now. Did you guys get the freezing rain?
No, it's 8 degrees here.
Okay, we got it last night. It's getting
Lots of rain.
more here.
Yeah, the last little while it's been quite wet.
Just in time for the guy to come and do my winter tires this morning.
I wish it would have been snow. Would have been great for snow.
The skidoo's coming home. I agree.
I'd be happy if I never saw it again.
The skidoo or the snow?
Well, unfortunately, I love the snowmobile, but I grew up in Labrador. I had one in my backyard. I took it to school, right? But I've had enough now.
That's enough.
Yeah.
When I lived there, we had the same thing, and then many years removed. I picked one up last year, and I'm absolutely in love with it again. So back to the woods.
My brother's on the river and he has a couple. He has some older kids and stuff. And so I'll go out and get his. That's the best kind of one.
You'll get your
else
fix. Yeah. Somebody else's. Brina, by way of the chat, just checking with you on participants, and maybe you can key us in on when we're ready to go.
We can start, Dion.
All right, we will kick off. So welcome, and thank you everybody for attending our session today. We're going to be giving you a little bit of information and details of a recent release that's come from Red Hat in support of Nutanix. Working with Nutanix and in turn in partnership and in multi-cloud solutions. Shane, if we can just get you to move to the next one. So just by way of some quick introductions here, I'll carry everybody through this. We have Shane Lafreniere, who's the Senior Software Advisor here at PureLogic. His hand was just up. I'm Dion Cochran, Senior Sales Executive for the federal government in Ottawa. We have Mr. Jason Barton, Solution Architect for Canadian FedGov. And we have Troy Johnson joining us today, who's a Senior Systems Engineer for Nutanix. We'll move on. So just to bring us through our quick agenda here today, introductions. I'm going to do a little bit of just to give some background on who PureLogic is and what we do. But we are going to dig and get quickly into why you're all here today is to hear from Nutanix, and in turn, the messaging from Red Hat, explain a little bit about the partnership. And we've also put some things together, some food for thought with regards to next steps and how we can help and how we can engage after. Then we can have some Q&A. One thing I will mention on the Q&A side, excuse me, please feel free to ask any questions through the chat. The chat will be monitored. And we will interject throughout the presentation to address your questions. So we we ask that you keep it interactive and feel free to do that at any time. So PureLogic, who are we? What do we do? So we're a 100% Canadian, woman-owned solutions integrator and IT reseller located in Ottawa. We sell primarily into enterprise space and the federal government, most of which has been for a number of years with what I'll refer to as guns and badges and the D&D side. But we also have a big presence as it relates to SSC and the 43 federal departments as well. We're 13 years in business, and I think that's probably 14 here in the next month or so. So we've been around for a while. We've been doing this for a while. Dynamic team, we're all top, or we have our security clearances. So we're either, some at which a base of reliability, most at secret, and we have a significant amount of our team that's top security. We're responsive, of course. We like to hear what's happening in the industry, and we like to bring back into industry events like this to be able to respond to some of the IT solutions that our customers are looking for. Wide variety of services and solutions, which I'll show you in a second. And we're 30 plus full-time employees. We've had a significant growth here in the last year and a half. And we have 27 consultants deployed within the federal government currently. Please, Shane. So our value proposition, which is an important part of who we are and what we do. We like to bring a multi-solution approach to any of our customers' IT challenges. We are unbiased, and we do that through way of consulting and solution recommendations. As I mentioned, most of our delivery folks and or solution architects are top secret cleared. We are a traditional value-added reseller, moving a little bit more towards more of a systems integration partner with our growing professional services. We are a cyber solution supplier to both federal government and D&D. We also work and manage the CSPV currently with SSC in place. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a eye chart here. So this is PureLogic's strategic partner landscape. You can see there's quite a few partners on here. One of the things that we've been known for and are really good at is helping with procurements. We hold many PISAs and CELSAs. We also have a lot of the other standing offers in way of professional services that we can help in bringing some folks in to help with the plan and design, and in turn the implementation of what you're looking for. This just gives you a little bit of a high level as to the pro services and TBIPs that we're on, our security clearance related to those services, and some of our resources on the side. Just to bring you a high level, this is once again an eye chart. You will get this once we send out a presentation, but these are the key areas in IT, whether it be workload migration, digital transformation, that we're involved in. Once again, all of our resources are trained and top secret cleared resources. So PureLogic IT has been a long time loyal partner with Red Hat. We've been working with them since 2010. And we also have a new partnership in place with Nutanix. I personally have been in the industry for 20 years. I've worked with Nutanix previously. I'm very excited to see what Red Hat has announced in partnership with Nutanix. And we're excited to be doing more with them. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Troy Johnson, and we'll get into the reason you're all here.
Thanks. Thanks, Dion, and thanks everybody for joining us today. As I mentioned, I'm the system engineer for Nutanix. I'm based in Ottawa. I cover the Canadian federal government and some large enterprise accounts in town, and that as well. There's another team in town that supports, smaller organizations, agencies, and that type of stuff. I know, I recognize some of the names on the participant list, and I know some of you are familiar with Nutanix, but I think for some of you others, maybe this is the first time you're really getting a chance to hear about our company. We came to market about 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago, as the pioneer of hyperconverged infrastructure for the enterprise. So what is HCI? Well, we looked and we saw how large cloud providers like Google were running their data centers and knew that enterprises could benefit from their experience and similar architecture. So fundamentally, what HCI is it's the virtualization of the storage. Much like VMware virtualized servers years ago, we're doing the same thing for your storage. So we've collapsed the complex three-tier tiers of legacy storage. And what we've done is we've taken that and put that into a single simple commodity hardware layer with all the functionality in software. So that allows us to provide the same enterprise feature set that you're used to from the largest storage arrays in a manner that's easy to acquire, deploy, and scale. And then over the last 10 or 15 years, what we've done is we've taken those foundations of HCI and layered on top of that what we call an enterprise cloud platform. So the goal is really to provide you that same experience you get from public cloud, regardless of whether you're running your applications on-prem or in some hybrid mode. The first workload that really kind of saw the benefits of HCI was VDI. And then we kept building robustness in our platform, improving performance, to the point now where we've had pretty much any workload that you can think of is supported and a good candidate to run on HCI. You know, as I said, like VDI was the big workload now, but today it might be a bit of a surprise, but the most common workload or the number one individual workload that's running on top of Nutanix databases, right? So one of the most mission critical applications for customers are running on our HCI infrastructure. And some think that the next biggest workload that we're going to be seeing will be containers. I certainly know I'm having a number of conversations with different customers, and it comes up every time. What's our container solution? And if you look at the latest market share numbers from companies like Gartner, they'll show that Nutanix currently leads the market with over 50% of software-defined storage. And why is that? So how have we, in 10 years, really become the market leader? Well, I think it's for three simple reasons. Could I get you to advance the slide? Thanks. It really comes down to these three things: simplicity, intelligence, and resilience. I'll get you to advance to the next slide. So really what Nutanix and Nutanix Experience is about, allowing you to deploy your infrastructure and have it up and running with workloads in as little as hours. And this is without having to pour through hundreds of pages of manuals from different manufacturers. And this is really to support all your critical apps, all the data and services, and that's in private and hybrid cloud deployments. We've got a customer in town, and I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, they bought about, I'm sorry, we'll stay on that first, the back slide for a second. Thank you. So yeah, about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, they bought over 60 nodes and half a petabyte of storage. It took them about 2 weeks to get that up and running. And I know that's a little more than the hours, but most of that time was actually spent working with the networking group. They had some really unique security requirements, and it took them a little while to kind of figure out how HCI would fit in that environment. But about 6 to 9 months later, they doubled that deployment. So they added another 60 nodes and another half a petabyte of storage. They had that up and running and deployed with workloads in under 2 days. And that was 2 people. Did all the racking, stacking, configuration, deployment of their, in this case, it was Horizon View, those components. And in under 2 days, they were serving desktops off that new infrastructure. And that's what our hyper-converged approach allows you to do. And a big thing of what makes this possible is, sorry, we're gonna have to come up with some sort of signal, right? Is it, do I pause? Is it my Newfie accent or something in there, right? Sorry. A big part of what makes all this really simple is our management plane. So we have a single plane called Prism, and Prism provides that one console for all the environments. So I'm supporting VMs, containers, structured and unstructured data, all different types of hardware. And I'm being able to manage that whole stack from that one single tool, Prism. Later, we'll have a little bit of a demo, I hope, some time for that. And I'll get to show you what Prism looks like. And the great thing is from that single console, not only am I managing my environment, but I can also do all my updates non-disruptively. So I'm talking about being able to update the firmware on the hardware, BIOS, the individual software components. I can do that from a single location, single tool, and it all happens non-disruptively. My workloads stay up and running. And then on top of that, we have the tools that allow you to easily move workloads around. I can have it running on-prem today, and in however long it takes to get the data up there, running in the cloud, maybe an hour later. And that holds true for our licensing model as well. So where you run the workloads, you can have license portability. So I can start out on-prem on my own hardware and decide I want to move to a more cloud-like service and move those workloads with the tools that we provide, and then also move our licensing as well. Next slide, please. So I know you watch, like I watch a lot of hockey, and you see some guys out there and they're doing amazing things. I play Saturday night beer league hockey, and I am not doing anything amazing. But the thing I find most impressive is they take what they do and it just looks so simple, right? It looks so easy. But we know that's covering up thousands of hours of effort, research, and training. Same for Nutanix and for our HCI platform. So we've taken all the effort and baked that intelligence into the platform itself. So what this does is it provides automated application management with a built-in marketplace. Again, later in the demo, we'll show you how we use that automated deployment and marketplace to deploy OpenShift on Nutanix. Also, there's machine learning based capacity planning, and that supports changing business. So if my workloads are growing, shrinking, the system has the intelligence to track all of that and then provide recommendations on what you're going to need to do to be able to have the infrastructure to support that. And the system also intelligently places workloads for the best possible performance. And we have tools that are available to automatically migrate apps from your legacy environments to this new private hybrid cloud model. Also, because it's tracking the whole stack from the hardware right through storage up to virtualization to the applications themselves, it can detect and resolve performance issues and security deviations, often without administrator intervention. Can I see the next slide, please? So as I said, Nutanix we're based on the same approach as used by the largest hyperscalers. If you go and look at their data centers, they're going to look much like an on-prem Nutanix data center. And it's something that they call web scale engineering. And what this does is it allows unlimited linear scaling. So I can start very, very small, a simple 3-node cluster. And as I add additional nodes, I know I'm going to get, the equivalent amount of performance, and I can keep scaling that cluster out to, massive sizes. And part of that is a really unmatched level of resilience. So our solution is designed to self-heal and move on. You got no fire drills. I lose a node, doesn't matter. The workload continues to be protected across the remaining components of the cluster. And then you replace any down hardware at your leisurely pace. Part and parcel to all this, and like a really strong availability solution, is DR. And there's a lot of DR strategies out there, but what we find oftentimes is they're not tested. It's kind of, well, I hope it's going to work if I have a problem. And then you find out when you do actually have a failover that you miss some small component. We provide the ability to orchestrate recovery plans so I can control that DR and have my workloads come up however it makes the most sense. But also we have the ability to simply configure and test failover to on-prem or cloud targets so that I know if I do have a real issue, my DR strategy is functional. Also, a big part of our platform is openness, right? So you can choose the hypervisor that you want to run. You can choose the hardware on which you want to run that. And you can choose to use Nutanix provided components or third-party solutions, depending on what makes the most sense for your application. And you can be confident that we're certified to run these most demanding applications, and we have tons of reference architectures that have been developed with our engineers and working with third parties. Could I see the next slide? And so I mentioned, like, you can pick your hypervisor, right? So everybody knows ESX, we also support Hyper-V. Don't see a lot of that, particularly in town. And then we also have our own provided hypervisor, which is AHV. So that's, it's based on best of breed open source projects such as KVM, some of the ones you see on the screen here today. And on top of that, we've layered the enterprise grade features like management, self-healing, security hardening, and high performance. So, all the features and functionality you expect from a modern day hypervisor, but we built that with an easy to manage, natively secure solution. And the great thing is no additional licensing required. I really think it's our hypervisor that's a key piece of this partnership that we're talking about today with Red Hat. So one of the big things, kind of like maybe the most critical factor when you're looking at, okay, what software am I going to run? What hypervisor I'm going to run in my environment is what's the third-party support, right? This joint announcement includes certification of AHV to be able to run Red Hat OS and applications. So that I think is a critical piece and something that's a real benefit for us of this new partnership, to be able to have more and more companies embrace the AHV as their hypervisor. I'm, ready to turn it over to Jason at Red Hat to talk about their perspective on this, but also if there are any questions that came up in the chat, if you want to take a moment, we can look at that.
So far, chat's been a bit quiet, but it's real interesting to know. I think hypervisor selection becomes key, especially if you can plug together hypervisor plus the sysadmin panel of your PaaS and your container platform, like you will with Red Hat. I'm really eager to see the demonstration and see what's involved.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and that's people ask, oh, why did you come to market? Why do you include your own hypervisor? Why is it not something that you're charging for? And from our perspective, the hypervisor is kind of table stakes, right? And it should be invisible to you deploying your applications. If you're putting a workload up to run in AWS or Azure, you don't even know what the hypervisor is it's running on. You don't even really care, right? So kind of our first thinking was we want to abstract the hardware, much again like the cloud infrastructure. You don't know, you don't care. And to us, the hypervisor is just an extension of that.
And what do you think is some of the partnership, go forwards that are coming out? Worldwide release, obviously, we saw. What are some of the, the nuggets that have been teasing you as to what could be coming out? With
regard to specifically this partnership?
And how Nutanix is going to be, moving forward. I mean, with this type of with an offering like this.
Well, I think that one of the biggest things is, as I mentioned, right, like today, the number one largest workload is databases. Mm-hmm. I think tomorrow it's going to be containers, right? And this is just allows us to extend that invisibility further up the stack, right? We make the hardware invisible, make the storage invisible, make the hypervisor invisible. Now make the whole service. And I think what's going to be coming out of this partnership is the ease of that integration. Right. So we'll see hopefully today how we can drive, OpenShift deployments from a Nutanix perspective using our automation tools. But I think there are a lot of organizations out there that require, more sophistication, more functionality, and they want to be able to, drive that deployment from Red Hat tools. And I think really what we're going to see as we do more joint engineering is that true integration, where like if you want to sit at the Red Hat control plane, that underlying infrastructure, in this case now will be right up to the deployment of containers, is simple and invisible.
Pretty cool. Okay, Jason, I have a nice bright red slide here.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Barton. I'm one of the technical resources that works for Red Hat in the Ottawa area. I have the responsibility for the technical relationship between Red Hat Canada and the Canadian federal government, as well as the Crown corporations. Just want to say thanks to Shane and Brina and Dion for letting me jump on the line here today. It's always kind of fun working with you and your crew. So I've enjoyed the time when we were prepping, and it was nice to make acquaintance with you too, Troy. So if you wanted to jump to the next slide, Shane, we can kind of start talking about the partnership details a little bit. This partnership, I think, was meant to be one of the kind of the primary things that we were going to talk about today, because I think it's one of those situations where two good situations were kind of needing to be brought together. And those two good situations are, the first part was what Troy was just talking about. You got a platform in that HCI space that's kind of proven itself to be a very effective tool in what all of us as IT professionals are trying to do, right? Which is to stand up and deliver services as efficiently and effectively as possible. So from the infrastructure perspective, for a number of years now, I've been being tapped as one of the technologists on the Red Hat side, working with large federal departments and the crown corporations about our relationship with Nutanix. And I was getting more and more pressure all the time with the simple question of, why aren't you supporting Red Hat Enterprise Linux and other technologies that we're betting some of our business on, like OpenShift, right? Red Hat's OpenShift container platform. Why aren't you doing a better job of supporting it on top of Nutanix? Because we were getting our clients coming to us and saying, these Nutanix platforms are a very important part of the way that we do our business, right? And for what it's worth, a number of years ago, I started to talk with one of my peers that works in the financial services industry, and it was very clear years ago, right, that exactly the use case that Troy had brought up, right, that database basically as a service, right, as workloads there had really found a foothold there. It was something that they were getting a lot of operational value out. And at the end of the day, it's really just about making it easier for us to all create services and get services out, either to our internal clients, right, maybe an application development team, or just literally a business unit, right, with a series of business analysts and things. But we need to get services out faster. And it was pretty clear years ago that what started to build was a messaging from our own clients, probably both Nutanix and to Red Hat, to get ourselves in a room and figure out how to get a partnership together. So very clearly, I just wanted to say what we've done together is Red Hat Enterprise Linux from the Red Hat side of the house, right, is fully certified and supported on top of the Nutanix platforms now, right? And that also goes on to extend to our container platform, referred to as OpenShift. So those two technologies are basically, the targets for an awful lot of workload deployments, right, these days. So traditionally, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right, an absolute de facto standard across the Canadian federal government. But then also now more and more our container platform, right, built on top of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right, that container platform called OpenShift, it's also becoming a significant deployment target for cloud-native applications, both on-premise and in public cloud. So really, you had the market more than anything deciding for us that when you have a favored platform like Nutanix, right, being great at delivering infrastructure, right, it was kind of just a recipe for success that we also then start to kind of place OpenShift on top of it as a supported platform, right? So Red Hat Enterprise Linux supported now, OpenShift supported now, right? And as Troy was saying, right, that Nutanix AHV hypervisor certified for us, right? We have joint engineering roadmaps moving forwards that are kind of picking up steam. And what we wanted to do more than anything was to have kind of that seamless support experience, right? So if you want to make your calls for Red Hat Enterprise Linux or OpenShift on top of Nutanix, then basically we have the support engineering relationships in place that we can do kind of seamless handoffs behind the scenes if necessary, and do triaging together and things like that. Very proactive way. So I, for one, am very happy that this has all gotten worked out, because it makes life a lot easier for many of my clients. And basically, it's kind of like almost becomes an operational best of breed workflows, right, working together. If you were to move forward a slide, Shane, I'll just kind of talk a little bit about, first of all, one of the highlights I think people wanted to talk about, and how Troy was talking about kind of an evolution for the workloads on top of Nutanix, right? It's this container space, right, that we keep hearing about. For those on the phone, if you're not, too familiar with containers, you might have heard of them as a buzzword, right? But in the Linux space, a container really is just it's a software packaging concept, right? Where basically you now have basically a standardized way to bundle together an application, not an OS, right? This isn't a virtual machine. This is actually the bundling of the application, typically the thing that we really care about, because it's the thing that's probably going to interact with a client or deliver service. But we can start bundling those applications, right, with all their dependencies. And that's a bit of the magic there, that we're able to actually bundle an application plus all its dependencies inside of a standardized format, right, that is portable, right? So we can move those things around. So just that idea of just that container itself as a new unit of compute, right? Kind of the next evolution of what virtual machines first brought to us. We have a new sense of kind of like granularity of control, of management, of development, and maybe most importantly, portability. And containers have been an absolute roaring, raving success for years now. So similar to the way 15 years ago it happened with the virtualization space, suddenly you need a orchestration layer. What's that thing? What's that platform that's going to be able to actually provide all the lifecycle management for containers? And that's what Red Hat is, right? That's what Red Hat OpenShift is. It's actually a container orchestration platform. Right. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of these things around that circle here are some of the things that we want to talk about as far as maybe like principles go, right? We want an experience for our clients, right? If we're actually serving up infrastructure to them, how would we like it served up to them? Well, we'd like it to be self-service. If I'm a series of software developers, or even if I'm kind of like an integration engineer bringing in, say, like ISV applications like SAP or databases or, you know, middleware of some type, right? We want that to be able to be done in a very nice, efficient, automated way, right? The same way that Nutanix platform is doing such a great job of being operationally efficient, being allowed to automate everything, right? We want that same kind of experience to continue out for the consumers of the application layer, right? Or maybe the participants in the application layer, being them either developers or deployers or operators of. So OpenShift, right, basically tries to kind of take what happened in the market around container orchestration, where Kubernetes, right, is basically very much the dominant technology globally now. And Red Hat became involved with Kubernetes, the orchestration platform, the container orchestration platform, you know, back in the 0.2, 0.3 days when we were asked to come in by Google, right, that started the project and said, can you make this more enterprise friendly? And that's what we've been doing. We've been wrapping things like role-based access controls, networking, routing, you know, monitoring, right, logging. These are all the types of things that, you know, years ago we started to try to add into the Kubernetes landscape. And we kind of packaged it all together as something called OpenShift. So if we're talking about service delivery, right, we've got that great infrastructure delivery option, right, from the Nutanix platform. Then we layer on another platform on top of that, which is OpenShift, which is really a great service delivery platform or application lifecycle management platform, however you'd like to think about it. So if you move the slide forward, Shane, if I just kind of gave a very brief, sometimes people want to wrap their heads, I know I do, with a picture of, he's kind of talking about different participants and all this, or different kind of customers and touch points and things. What does he really mean by that? If I start at the top there, kind of the green box, the value of OpenShift, right? We kind of break it out into different areas that OpenShift layers on top of Kubernetes, right? So Red Hat OpenShift delivers, right, a well-engineered Kubernetes-based solution, right? So Kubernetes is baked into OpenShift, absolutely, right? But then on top of that, to provide that type of service delivery platform that you want, all the things that the operators, the developers, the integration engineers bringing in ISV applications, right? Security teams, network team, to wrap all of those things together, Kubernetes really is a distributed resource scheduling system. If you really look at it its heart, it does a great job of scheduling workloads, but it wasn't built initially to service all those other communities of users. So that's why, you know, I talk about things like cluster services, right? So an operations staff looking at both the applications and the infrastructure. How do I do my monitoring, logging, a registry, telemetry, routers, right? Those are all services, right, that are provided by OpenShift and are easily managed, right? Now I kind of shift over and start to think about a different user community, right? Like application developers, right? What are application developers themselves counting on, right? Well, they want different types of runtimes. And by runtimes, I mean things like Java or, Python, like all sorts of application runtime, or sorry, developer runtimes that they might want to get their hands on. Those are all provided and supported and part of the well automated workflows that a developer might be expecting these days in the form of, say, pipelines. There's other more advanced services from OpenShift as well, like a service mesh, like a serverless computing as well is supported on top. Very easy to build out if you're kind of a developer architect, to start building out the well-defined pipelines and things using our CI/CD activities, dev tools. We have basically a web-based IDE that's built in as well. And also those same ISV kind of integration engineers I talk about, the ones worrying about bringing an SAP in or an Oracle in or someone else in, right? Like a MongoDB or other places, they can start making use of those same automated workflows to make it very easy to onboard outside applications, right? And get them into service and iterate and provide updates and well-managed governance for them. So hopefully it's starting to somewhat come into kind of frame here that what we've got is we've got a platform in Nutanix that's really, really good, really, really efficient at making that kind of traditional infrastructure more easily managed, more easily accessible, right? More easily governed, right? And now all of a sudden, right, we have this kind of new way of building our applications or onboarding third-party applications that's also very efficient, right? So we're kind of layering them together. And now what you've got is a very efficient, basically cloud native or private, or a cloud native private cloud, right? From the two together, if you want to look at it from an on-premise perspective. If you move forward, Shane, one more, please. I was trying to compete with Shane, as he and I typically do. So I wanted to try to, or maybe it was Dion even too, to try to win the eye chart contest. This is a ridiculous slide, right? So the reason why I put it up there is to basically show, this is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation slide for the overall ecosystem of tooling that you can now find in this cloud native space. So the reason why I bring it up is, if you're just kind of getting into this world of containers, right? Container orchestration, the best way to actually do all your operational best practices, your development best practices, governance, you need to go to like an ATO, things like that, right? The landscape of technologies that are available to you are overwhelming, right? Like the speed at which we were able to adopt virtualization 15 years ago, it's kind of like we're almost trying to try to cram in all the things that we learned over the course of years. We're trying to cram into months, right? So I bring this up because when you have access to people like Troy, right, who's a hands-on technologist, plus the people behind me that are hands-on technologists, right, in the container space, the application development space. What we really want to talk to people on the phone today about is actually just trying to help you build things, right? How to make it as frictionless and as easy as possible to get the human expertise, right? Because like this slide is trying to show, the number of choices you can make is absolutely staggering. So if I was in anyone's shoes on the phone right now, I'd be thinking, well, how in the world do I know if I'm actually making good choices here or not? So you put a Troy in a room with some of my guys like Andrew Pitt or Greg Percunier or others, right? And it starts to give you access to specialization. And that's really, I think, what PureLogic more than anything is giving you an opportunity here at, right? They're kind of the ones that are bringing together Nutanix and Red Hat together to try to work with you on potentially, creating basically new kind of cloud native operating and development and deployment practices for yourselves, which we'd happily do, right? Because it's hard. Like this stuff is really complicated these days because there's just so much choice. And people are still forming the proven opinions and the proven practices. Sorry, go ahead, Shane. If I just kind of honed in on that OpenShift on Nutanix piece, right, just for a moment, because I think that's what we're going to try to offer up at the end of this, right? And Troy's going to show a little demonstration of how easy it would be for all of us to kind of do a very quick proof of concept or try it out, roll up the sleeves and actually try to get some real work done, without it being really any investment on your part from a financial perspective, but try to keep it as easy as possible to start to just kind of figure out what the space might have to offer you. So the place we'd probably focus is, rather than looking at, say, like Red Hat Enterprise Linux on top of Nutanix, we'd be looking at OpenShift on Nutanix, right? As kind of a full service delivery platform that you can get to very rapidly. And like this slide is saying, fully supported, right? OpenShift fully supported on Nutanix AOS today, right? That means that you've got basically the OpenShift worker nodes and things that are kind of actually doing the work for you, where the containers are running. That's on the AHV hypervisor. We make it very easy, right, to integrate into the storage provided by the Nutanix platform. So those container workloads, whether they're databases or, you know, other types of applications that have their data needs, right? Basically, you've got that very well plumbed, automated, right? Very easy to contract, right? As code, right? Kind of the relationship between the applications and the storage within the Nutanix platform, right? And that's part of the container storage interface provisioner that you see there that Nutanix has provided to the mix, right? The biggest thing I like about this is, for quite a while, we're going to have virtualization, right? We're going to have our VMs, just like we still have our mainframes. But this Nutanix platform, right, is going to bring you basically like a best of breed access to having kind of a mixed ecosystem of both virtual machines and containers with, you know, a pretty seamless operational experience, I'd like to think. Now, as far as future work goes, right, Nutanix and Red Hat are investing in basically making the entire, you know, deployment and ongoing, you know, updates of the OpenShift platform on top of Nutanix just easier. You know, let's try to remove as much friction as possible. Right now, today, we have a nice approach using a user provisioned infrastructure kind of install that we call it, right? That allows for lots of flexibility. But honestly, it's not as streamlined as it could be. It's not as optimized as it could be, right? So what we're moving towards is making use of Nutanix COM, right, as an automation framework, right? And we'll start to kind of piece together what's basically a much better installer provisioned infrastructure type of approach, which I think I talk on the next slide, Shane, if you want to move to. And this is where, like, really, for the time being, what we just want to make sure is that from an operational perspective, right, that, you know, kind of first steps here for the next quarter, 2 quarters, we'll just be making sure that, you know, everything is, you know, all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and the operational experience with OpenShift on top of Nutanix is operationally efficient and as streamlined as possible. So if you go to the next slide, the reason why I'm bringing this up for the people on the line is, you know, a lot of times we talk about technology, and what we'd really like to do, Nutanix and Red Hat and PureLogic together, is talk about how we can actually work together. So this is something we often kind of tackle on my team with Red Hat. And I know Troy is completely up for this and absolutely able to drop right into this. But this is what we refer to as the common enablement timeline. And the reason why we call it this is we just found that there was a pattern years ago that whenever we were doing this kind of new work to take on something like the OpenShift platform, we did the same pattern over and over and over again, right? So we just decided to make sure everybody understood how far we were willing to go, bringing human expertise to the table. Like that crazy eye chart slide showed, it's a complicated space, and we'd like it to make it as easy as possible to start rolling up your sleeves to get a feel for the technologies and how you could make use of them, right? So over on that left-hand side of the go forward decision, right, we want everyone to be able to make as quick a decision as possible as to whether you want to keep investing with us. All we ask at the start is that some people, right, be made available to us, right? We know those are probably the most valuable resources we have. So we're not going to ask people to go through procurement. We're not going to ask for money. We're not going to ask for things like that. We just want people to work through it with us. So in the matter of probably what sometimes turns into just a very small number of weeks, we can go through what are the technical overviews to start the familiarization, right? We want the people to start by getting comfortable, then we want them to become competent, and then we want to get them confident, right? Confident takes a while. But that comfortable piece, we can start moving really fast, right? We do overviews and demos, right? Which, you know, you'll start to even see just the little starter one at the start from Troy. We like to jump into like Q&A whiteboards immediately. So we might have a technical overview on one day, The next week, we're doing a Q&A whiteboard because some questions came up in your head. You may actually say, hey, can you prove that you can do 1, 2, and 3? Like, what would that actually look like, right? We'll come back the week after that. We'll do proof points, right? One of our longest ones was, I think, a dozen different proof points for an integration project that we sat on a video call for 6 hours straight with a big team. Right. By the time we were done that 6 hours, right, they basically said, it seems like you can do what you said you can do. So how do we get started? And we said, well, why don't we do a Tiger team proof of concept, where in the span of about 2 days, we will again come back, do more teaching and enablement, but at the same time, actually install a cluster for you. So between Troy and my team, pretty quickly, we could probably actually have a OpenShift environment up and running for you on top of the Nutanix platform, kind of talking about how it could be made use of either for custom software development or ISV software onboarding, things like that. And as we go through this, we'll even offer up to developers or to operations teams enablement workshops, right? And those are like typically 3 to 4 hours. Sometimes they're combined, they can be a day long. But what we want people to do is become comfortable, right, and competent with their understanding of the technology as fast as possible, so you can make a real commitment to it, not just to us, but to yourselves, right? It has to be a good fit for both sides. When I say both sides, I mean that because I'm going to keep bringing people like experts like Troy or Andrew or Greg or Marat or, Arsini. These people will come and they will work with you. But I only have so many of those people, so that's why I try to make sure that everybody's very comfortable with the decisions. But we'll go through this type of enablement timeline. We've had in the shortest span of like a month, all of a sudden someone actually has a cluster with a real workload actually running on it, not necessarily in production because maybe they weren't able to do kind of like a security assessment, but in their own labs, they've got a real workload up and running, and the operations team kind of starting to feel comfortable, the security team's feeling comfortable, software development's feeling comfortable, management and directors are starting to understand from a governance perspective what's involved here in team change. So it can all happen pretty fast, and that's what we're trying to offer. So one more slide there, or I think it might be a handoff to Troy at this point, Shane. Yeah, so Troy, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to anything I've said. Otherwise, I'm happy to just kind of you to start to show kind of the idea of, it's not too hard for us to start actually working with people, and we can make it pretty frictionless. So, I don't know if this is the best time to hand over to you, Troy, or if Shane, you had a comment that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'll just go quick and before I show the next step slides, but I'll definitely hand it over to Troy just in case, but and we'll come back to Dion in a second. I also wanted to confirm that the Uber Eats cards are also being sent out and should be in your inbox as well. So as I'm doing that, I will stop sharing, Troy, and continue to talk while you grab the console. And there we go.
And are you seeing?
Let's have a look. We are.
Perfect. Just a couple of things that came up with. Thank God Jason said he's got people to help, because when he showed that eye chart and he said that I could help you guys, I thought, I don't think so. And you guys are going to be around, and Red Hat's going to be around to do all that other stuff, right? We'll get you the platform up and running. And Jason mentioned as well, like the ability to come in and demo, and also provide an environment for you guys to be able to do your testing, experimentation in that. Quickly is something we make available as well. So if we look at the screen right now, this is Prism. So remember I talked about that common management plane? This is what it looks like. HTML5, no plugins, and no special versions of Java, nothing like that, right? You got a modern browser, you can manage your environment. And there's kind of two hierarchies of Prism. We have Prism Element. What this allows me to do, particularly notice this cluster is running AHV. It allows me to do everything I need to do in my cluster. I don't need any other tools. So when I bring a cluster up, it automatically comes up with the management plane as well. I'm not deploying separate components. And then on top of that, I can layer what we call Prism Central. Prism Central can be that single pane that allows me to manage all the clusters in my environment. So no matter how large my environment is, I can manage everything from this one place. So this, what I'm looking at right now, it's a physical cluster. It has 4 nodes or hosts. A node or a host in a Nutanix cluster it's an x86 or an AMD server with memory, compute, and some storage. That storage can be a mix of SSD and HDD, all SSD, and NVMe. We're qualifying now 3D Optane. So our architecture allows us just to incorporate quickly any new hardware technology that comes out around storage and be able to build it into your cluster. And the great thing is these nodes or hosts, they don't have to be the same. I can be running a 4-node cluster and then get a workload requirement that says I need a lot of storage, and then I can deploy in that same cluster storage heavy nodes. So what we're looking at now, it's as I said, a 4-node cluster. So this is in an environment, a hosted environment that we support, that we make available to our customers and the customers of our partners. So if this is something that you want to try, you can go to Dion, and we can very quickly give you access to your own physical environment where you can go in and deploy OpenShift, do all your testing, do all your experimentation, and even upload and download workloads to and from your own environment into our hosted environment. So anytime you want to try out Nutanix, you want to try something with Red Hat, we can easily make this environment available. So if I look right now at this Prism Central, it's a very small environment for us. We're only managing one cluster. What a Prism Central also allows us to do is that automation for application deployment. So we have, Jason showed it very briefly, something called Calm. And what Calm really is, think of it as like a self-service portal for your infrastructure. And what you do is you build blueprints. We provide blueprints. We've done work particularly around OpenShift with Red Hat to build blueprints that allow us to deploy an application. It could be as simple as one piece of software running on one VM, or it could be multi-tiered. And you bake all that information into the blueprint. And then when you run the blueprint, you get an instance of that application, and you get it deployed the way that you want with all your best practices every single time. So if you look at this particular blueprint here today for deploying OpenShift, we'll see it's actually deploying a number of different machines, in this case, multiple masters, a load balancer, bootstrap server, connecting to an existing server for DNS entries. We bake all of those steps into the blueprint, and that allows us to quickly and consistently provision a particular application. So if I look at right now, I have a provisioning server in my environment. Sorry. And what I can do, if I look at that, it gives me the ability to run a number of different steps, and you can see it's sourcing where I want to get components. If I look at that server that was run, it gives me the ability now to deploy what we call a service. So I can deploy OpenShift. When I run that, it's actually running that blueprint that we just saw with the multiple components in it. Ask me a couple of simple questions. I have to provide a pull secret. I think I have it. No, that looks too short. And then, it wants information specific to my particular deployment. I run it. And then I can watch and see what's happening, right? The end result is I'll get another application. So another instance of an OpenShift environment. And then I have an environment that's available to me to access. No, it's not getting away the password, sorry. It's fun to watch somebody struggle at it.
That's a hardcore password. Except it's stored in notes.
So I can see if I look right now, my blueprint is still running. So it takes about 15 or 20 minutes, but the end result, I can see here, this new instance of OpenShift that I've just deployed is still in the provisioning stage. I can go in and look and see at all the steps that happen. And without this ability, I'd be doing this manually. So if I look at all the steps that have to take place to deploy an OpenShift cluster, you can see if I doing this the manual way, it could take quite a while, and there's lots of opportunity for missteps, misconfigurations. Rather, we bake all of those steps into the blueprint so that when I run it every time, it all happens automatically, and I'm not worrying about fat fingering some setting or anything like that. It's all handled automatically.
And Troy, I guess
Sorry?
Prism also has a capability of repaving or rebuilding or reallocating those kinds of workloads, or making sure that OCP is up all the time.
Yeah, so we have the ability within Prism Central to define actions and events. And so what we can do is we can track particular metrics, things server being up or down, or even CPU utilization or memory utilization, and then automatically have an action occur when that trigger hits, right? So if a server goes down, or if a server exceeds a certain amount of memory utilization, that would be the trigger, and then some action would take place. I think like in the OpenShift world, that kind of availability within that environment would probably be being managed there rather than through Prism. Right? So I need to bring up another worker, or I need to bring another instance of a particular container to scale out because of demand. I think that stuff would be handled in the OpenShift world.
Yes.
And then everything that we do within Nutanix, everything that Prism does is exposed to our REST API. So I think moving forward, what we're going to see more of, rather than in this case here, it's a very kind of a Nutanix focused approach where I'm running our blueprint to deploy OpenShift using a UPI method that Jason mentioned. I think in the future, what we're going to see is more actually top-down driven, where from the OpenShift management console, you're going to be able to bring up our underlying infrastructure and scale out our underlying infrastructure through our API. And perhaps maybe it does call and run one of our blueprints, but that control is happening at a higher level.
And then I guess a question too, from a Nutanix perspective. I mean, obviously from a Red Hat perspective, doing an OpenShift platform update, I mean, it's pretty normal kinds of things. From a Nutanix perspective, would the Nutanix admin potentially be the one to apply a Delta package or a Delta project file to do an update? Or what do you see some of your customers sort of engaging in that kind of conversation? Is it the Nutanix admin or the Prism admin that has to do a day 2 update, or is it really being handled by the OpenShift personnel?
I think, again, it's just early days for a lot of my customers dealing with this, so they're trying to figure out things like that. From like my perspective, I think that would probably, like, updating of the OpenShift components itself, the underlying pieces there, I think that's probably going to be handled at the OpenShift level. I think that's the people that are managing that understand that. That's where they are most comfortable. And to me, I think it makes the most sense, right?
Yep.
The underlying infrastructure, all the way up to the hypervisor, that would be probably managed through Prism. And then we provide what we call LCM, so Lifecycle Manager. That's a tool that I mentioned earlier that allows you to upgrade all the individual components. So I think there's kind of might be two pieces to it, right? Somebody handles the infrastructure, but that infrastructure now is not just, a storage array or, host. That infrastructure is all the way up onto the level at which you're deploying those containers. That part, that's all now going to be managed by, one tool, by, one team. But I think you're still going to have that at the Red Hat level, that team as well doing their components on top, right? Now you could extend the underlying updating through our API, right? So you can have the Red Hat team managing all that, but early days, I don't see that yet.
No, I agree. I think it's going to come down to organizational structure and such, in that, the classical Nutanix sysadmin of providing these types of services, and the service being a container platform, which happens to be OpenShift, and then he fires it up and then lets it live. And then, but I do see in smaller enterprises where you have a one-stop shop and that type of capability where they need to then control everything. But no, I think it's pretty slick. I think seeing these types of runbook automation within Prism through your blueprints is a great step to move forward. Being wary of time, is there anything else you'd like to show?
Yeah, just one thing on that. So, and it's funny, I was with a customer yesterday and we were going through exactly this. They're looking at OpenShift. They want to get an OpenShift environment up and running really, really quickly. They were actually looking at deploying it on more traditional infrastructure. And then this announcement came out, part of the Red Hat and Nutanix team did the work to build those blueprints. So we went through this exercise. They had a Nutanix cluster in their environment already. So, well, we could, rather than the weeks and weeks that you're looking at trying to get this going piecemeal, how about we just try this? So we sat around, 5 of us in a conference room yesterday and spun it up. And they were up and running and ready to kind of move on to where they actually wanted to be. They didn't want to be spending days and weeks getting the infrastructure up, the storage up, and all the different problems. They just wanted to get to here. What we're seeing now on screen, they just wanted to get to there. So they had an environment, so then they could turn it over to their clients and say, okay, here's your environment, go ahead now and start building your applications and do your testing. And a big part as well, and one of the things that they were initially recognizing that was going to be complicated was providing storage. So how do you get storage to a container environment, like persistent storage? That can be a complicated endeavor in some cases. But here, Jason mentioned that CSI driver, so that integration to our storage. And part of the blueprint that we ran to bring up this cluster presented our storage as a persistent volume to OpenShift. As part of that kind of one click, put in 3 or 4 or 5 different pieces of information. The end result is not only do I have an OpenShift environment, but one that has storage available as well. And the great thing about, sorry, Joe, I was just going to say the great thing about, virtualizing or presenting that infrastructure logically is underneath, I can make that Nutanix cluster bigger. I can give it more compute. I can give it more memory. I can update the versions of software. I can put more storage, faster storage as new technologies come out. All of that is now available to the upper level, available to OpenShift. And I don't have to necessarily do anything to manage that. Now I'll just suddenly have more storage, I have faster storage available. And all that kind of happens organically.
Well, and I like how you can plug in the Red Hat OpenShift sort of process from a GUI perspective, because if it plugs in, it just means that if I'm a command line junkie, I can drive everything via a Prism command line instead and leverage the embedded APIs.
Yeah, and what I see and what I really like about the approach that Nutanix has been taken when they're adding capabilities like orchestration and stuff, everything's exposed through the API. So, I can, from within Prism, I can call out, but I can also do everything from some other platform as well if I want to. If that's my preference, I've done a lot of work, and our automation and our tools and the scripting, it also reaches out, right? So you're using Puppet, Ansible, that type of stuff. There's integrations there as well.
That's awesome, guys. I'm just going to bring us home here because we are a couple minutes over. Troy, thank you very, very much for demoing that. Jason, in turn, thank you for carrying over that message. One of the closing comments I was going to make, I think you would all agree that we're yet to go to a client, whether it be internally or externally, and they say to us, you know what, Dion, I have less data, I have less applications, therefore I need less management, right? That just doesn't happen. So taking a server and data storage distributed software-defined infrastructure, coupling that with an enterprise-grade software application, whether it be in container or outside a container, we're solutioning for our clients' requirements. These are growing tremendously at a very exponential rate. One of the closing comments I just wanted to make here. So to Jason's point, we, as a commitment in working on these solutions with our clients, we just ask for people. We want people that we can open up the dialogue, start to solution with. And one of the things that we collectively got together on and thought of as a bit of a next steps as it relates to the seminar is what can we do, what can we offer, just to sort of bring it home and to continue the engagement. So, we want to engage in the deep dives. Jason's reference of a Tiger team here, that is, whether it be a mix of a Troy or someone on Troy's team, someone on Jason's team, someone on our team, to be able to sit with you and sort of orchestrate and architect where you may want to go with this. And we'll provide, whether it be on-site or hosted live environment demo sessions, give you a playground or a sandbox to go in and try it out. Then we can circle back and do architectural review, which would then streamline it maybe into a little bit more of a test of POC. So that's kind of a bit of a process that we've thought out, where we've used it before. It seemed to have worked well. We want you to engage with us to have those conversations and open that dialogue, and we're here to help. So you do have my information here. I can be reached at any time, and I will put you in touch with whether it be Shane, Troy, Jason. Just in closing us out here, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We really appreciate you coming out. Hope you learned a few things, whether it be from Nutanix and or on Red Hat, and most importantly on their partnership moving forward. So that is all we have, folks. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. One thing to mention, if there's any issues in the Uber Eats, as I put into the chat, please let us know. We traditionally like to do these in person at lunch and learn sessions. Sometimes that's a little bit tricky these days, but we hope to get back to that soon. But we do want to thank you for your time and providing you with some lunch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, Brina. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Troy and Jason. Everybody have a good day. Bye for now.